Hello, I'm Ben. Welcome to the channel. So it's now 2025, and last night everyone celebrated the New Year across the country, and there were some incidents that occurred in Las Vegas and in New Orleans that bring up several questions around firearms and personal defense and things of that nature. But I also had a friend reach out to me over the holiday, and it is New Year's Day here, so happy holidays. And we just got through the Christmas holiday, and now preparing to jump back into the new year tomorrow. And the question on top of his mind is, look, we're moving, and where we're moving to, there are bears and moose and things of that nature. So on top of that, and you look at the human concern, there are several reasons that people own firearms. And I'll tell you, for me personally, I know the statistics too well on how long it takes police officers to get to people. And the more rural you live, and if you're on a mailbox rural route, it's going to take a bit longer because cars sometimes, GPS and those type of things don't work as incredibly accurate as they do in city blocks or inside of city ordinances. So with that being said, what I'm going to do today is go through my suggestions for the firearms that you should own. And if you're new to firearms, give you some suggestions around what to get when it comes to that, just based on my opinion. There are tons of opinions, there are as many opinions as there are people. But I think these are the things that matter most. So let's talk about this before we jump in, because this is meant to be an educational piece. There's not going to be any footage of me shooting the firearms or anything else. But training on your gun is extremely important, and knowing how to use that is extremely important, and having your family members also know how to use that is extremely important as well. So when it comes to firearms, if you're going to have them in your home, especially if you have members of your family that are not aware of firearms or don't like them even, the reason people don't like firearms is they're scary, and the fact that it goes boom and something flies out, right? So the point is, if you teach those people the 4 essential rules of firearm safety, and if you teach those people how to manually work the firearm and how to load it and unload it and how to handle it correctly, it should take away a lot of that fear. And it's no different from anyone else's fear about anything else. Driving, for example, the majority of us drive cars, but in the beginning, when we first got behind the wheel of a car, we were very afraid or timid on what that car could do to us. Gun's no different than a car, okay? If you do the wrong things with a car, you will pay consequences. If you do the wrong things with a gun, you'll pay consequences. And cars are deadly just like guns. Just last night in New Orleans, a guy drove into a crowd of people celebrating New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And he killed, I think, up to 9 were killed and about 40 people were hurt. And this was just last night in New Orleans. And then at the same time, a truck was blown up in Las Vegas. So here's the point. When it comes to defending yourself and your family and your life, you are responsible for that, because a police officer can't be on every corner. And police respond to crimes that have happened, okay? They're not a preventative measure. It's just like a fire extinguisher. A gun, in my mind, is just like a fire extinguisher. It's better to have one and not need it than to need it and not have it. So let's jump right into this and get after it. The 4 essential rules of firearm safety go as follows. 1, you treat all firearms as if they're loaded. You want to assume that they're loaded. You don't point at anybody. You don't pull the trigger unless you open the gun and clear it and make sure that it's empty. There's no reason for you to pull the trigger before you do that. People sometimes get complacent and will pull the trigger, and these are people who think they're firearms, wizards. And I've seen them pull the trigger and have negligent discharges, desk pops, those type of things, actually shoot the gun inside the building they're in, which is a bad idea. So number 1 is treat all firearms as if they're loaded. And the second step of that is keep all guns pointed in a safe direction. So for example, if you are sitting down at a desk and you lay a gun on the desk, have it pointed away from you, but not towards the door, because somebody might walk in. You want that barrel pointed in a safe direction at all times. The next one is keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. One of the things I think is very dangerous these days is you'll see cops get up to a scene and pull their guns before they know what's going on. So now they've introduced a final solution in a situation that might not require any of that. You want them to be safe, but the point is, I don't think you should pull your gun unless you're expecting to use it. So keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, okay? Because if you don't keep your finger off the trigger, guns have different responses. Some, it may take a full squeeze to get that trigger to pop. Some, you barely touch the trigger, it'll go. So you want to make sure it's your finger that's making the decision. So make sure you know to make the right decision. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Know your target and what is beyond it. So I think this is a rule now that gets looked over a lot, because if If you watch the videos online, and I'm not trying to be a police officer, there's just more of those available than anything else. You'll see cops dump a 17-round magazine and then reload and dump another 17-round magazine in the direction of the target. That's not thinking about knowing your target and what's behind it. Every one of those bullets you're responsible for. So if you shoot up the world trying to hit one target, you're responsible for every one of those bullets. That's what's the worst thing about drive-bys. If drive-bys were gangs just killing other gang members, fine. Let them do it all day long. Just have shifts of that where they're just wearing each other out like that, because that will take care of the problem. The issue is the majority of gang violence that happens like that today, they just drive by and shoot up houses. And in that house is somebody's grandma, in that house is somebody's baby, in that house is some young child, right? I mean, it ends up creating a situation where the victims are too numerous to mention. So know how to use the weapon and be certain that you know what your target is and what behind it. There's a couple other safety suggestions too. Be certain the firearm is safe to operate. This is absolutely true. Some guns, if there's something in the barrel and you have an issue with that gun can explode and that can be fatal. You want to make sure that the firearm is safe to operate, works appropriately. The way you do that is you go to a range, you pay someone to look at the gun, you pay someone to watch you shoot it and help you with the shooting. And you do that for 2 or 3 times till you get good and comfortable with your gun. And every time you get a new gun, treat it the same way. If you're raised around firearms, remember the safety rules. Sometimes people who have been around guns their entire lives, they don't act in a safe manner. So be certain the firearm is safe to operate. Know how to operate your firearm properly is the next. And store your firearms in an appropriate place where unauthorized people can't get to them. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and dive into what I think are the right answers on what guns should I own. So I say this, number one's a 22. I didn't pull a 22 out. Most people have seen 22s. Just because if you want to get comfortable with firearms, the best suggestion I would give you is to shoot more often. So for example, if you want to feel like a pro at firearms, go shoot every Saturday for 2 months. If you go shoot at targets every Saturday for 2 months, at the end of that 2-month period, you'll be far more comfortable with your firearm. You'll be far more comfortable with storing firearms, shooting firearms, cleaning firearms, and you ask for help each one of those times. It's like education, okay? Once you learn how to use something, you can use it appropriately, like a computer or a car. A firearm is no different. It's just a tool that we use, all of which can be dangerous, right? So you want to make sure you do that appropriately. So the first thing I'd say you need to own is a 22. The second is a pump action shotgun. Okay, and this is saying if you're new to firearms, number one is a 22. It can be a pistol or it can be a rifle. But number 2 is a pump action shotgun. Number 3 is a pistol specifically for self-defense, right? Home defense or self-defense. This is something you may carry as well. Number 4 is a bolt action rifle. Because with a bolt action rifle, you can use that as home defense, but you can also use that to go out and hunt big game. Or if you live on rural acreage, you may need something like that to protect your animals, to protect your home, etc. If you have bears and things of that nature, they will come right in your yard finding food, and they don't know the boundary lines, right? They just walk right in. And the last one is a semi-automatic rifle, which may be the best suggestion for self-defense in certain situations. So we'll go through those and I'll give examples of each. I'm going to start out with a revolver, for example, because I mentioned a handgun. This is a revolver. This one happens to be a .357 made by Ruger. Okay, and guys, none of these guns I have in this room are loaded. What you do is you load that cylinder with your bullets. This gun holds 5. Then you close the cylinder. And this is a double action weapon, so you can pull the trigger and it will fire, and it's empty. You can pull the trigger and it will fire, or you can cock the hammer and pull the trigger and it will fire. That's because this is double action. There are some pistols that are single action, so when you get your pistol, go to the range, have someone train you, hire somebody that knows how to do that, or go take a course so they can show you how to load and manipulate that weapon correctly. The next is a semi-automatic pistol. This is a Glock 17. You see that it is empty and there's nothing in the chamber. The way you would load the gun is you load the magazine just like that. You would pull the slide back, and of course it's going to lock back because the magazine is empty. But once you pull the slide back and the slide goes forward, Now you have one in the chamber, and then you have your loaded magazine after that. So each time you pull the trigger, the slide will go back and forth and load a new round into the chamber and kick the old round out. You see where my finger is naturally? To pull the trigger on a Glock, you have to flatten that out. The safety is actually on the trigger. Of course, this one has a light on it and everything else. This was the first Glock I ever bought. It's a Glock 17. I've had it probably, and it's in 9mm. I've had this one, it's been over 20 years now. And it's the first Glock I ever bought. This is the gun that I use when I go to trainings, and when I go to have to shoot some certification, I typically take that. This is why I mentioned the Glock 17 or 19. Both of those guns are 9mm. The 19 is slightly smaller in size than the 17. If you're brand new to guns, I recommend that pistol over all other pistols. This is why. It is something that you can count on. It's always going to run properly, and it's always going to work, right? Every time you pull the trigger, it's going to go bang. It's extremely important that you get used to the bang coming when you squeeze the trigger. So you have to get used to owning that weapon, using that weapon, and being comfortable with it. So the first recommendation on the list, outside of a 22, pick any 22, use those to train up. Could be a pistol or rifle, maybe one of both. The next step is to look at a handgun. I would recommend a handgun that is a 9mm Glock, either a 17 or a 19. If you're buying that weapon used, new, they cost around $650. This is in Texas. Used, you can get them from $350 to $450. Okay, and then and when you do that, you want to make sure that it's Glock parts. A lot of people take a Glock and they call it Gucci, but it's just people screwing up the weapon. They add on a bunch of parts. You've seen my weapon, my carry gun rather, in a previous video if you watch all the videos on this channel. It's a 10mm that I've changed the barrel out on, and I have everything else is standard Glock besides the barrel and the sights. So if you're going to do an upgrade to your Glock, the one upgrade I would recommend is the sights. And you see that I have a light. All the guns that I carry, I have a light on them, just because you're most likely going to have to use the weapon in a period where it's dark out. So that's why I have a light on all of mine. So my pistol recommendation for a beginner is a Glock 17 or 19. Both of those are 9mm. The 19 is a little bit smaller than the 17. The numbers on Glocks, it's very simple. That was the model number when it came out, right? So number 1 is a different gun. Number 17 is a different gun. The calibers, though, you'll learn those as you get more accustomed to Glock. So the next thing is, I said a pump action shotgun. The reason I recommend a pump is pumps don't fail. And if you get the right pump, which I'm going to suggest here. Now this gun is loaded. This is a Mossberg 590A1. Okay, so I'll show you that there. Wooden furniture, Mossberg 590. It's got a light on it. This is my home defense shotgun. So it's got a couple rounds on the back end. It's loaded. It's wood furniture, but this is a Mossberg 590A1. The safety on a Mossberg is right there. I really like that. We'll discuss that more here in just a second. So the reason on a Mossberg that I like that front sight setup is, or that safety setup is, in the dark, you can push that off safety and you know you've done that. If it's forward, the gun's ready to go, boom. If it's back, the gun's on safe. Of course, for it to be forward, you have to click-clack the slide and put a round in the chamber. Mossbergs offer several different price categories. So if you have less money to spend, you can get a Mossberg Maverick 88. The only thing I don't like about the Mavericks is it's got the Remington safety. So the safety is around the trigger guard, which in the dark, that may be difficult to find. So the next step up is a Mossberg 500. You can get those used between $300 and $400, right? $300 and $450 all day long. You can get a Mossberg 500, which the safety on a Mossberg 500 is exactly where that one is. And that would be the best suggestion. I started out with a Mossberg 500. I still have it today. It's a hunting shotgun that I keep in my safe. It's one that my grandfather gave me. And I think that's why I'm a Mossberg man. And ultimately, that's how most people determine what it is they're going to shoot, as a family member gives it to them or something, and it works out that way. Mossberg shotguns are the answer. So the next thing that comes back around that is then what caliber should I get? So there's 410, 20 gauge, and 12 gauge, which are normal these days, right? You have 10 gauge and 28 gauge. You have a bunch of other different gauges, but right now, most people are aware of the 20, the 12, and then the 410. For home defense, I would recommend the 20 gauge or the 12 gauge. So if you're small in stature, then go with the 20 gauge. If you're very comfortable with the 12 gauge though, and you shot one many times, then go with the 12 gauge. All of my shotguns that are out for home defense, or that I recommend for home defense to people, or that I've given to family members for home defense, were 12 gauge or 20 gauge. So the young ladies that are smaller in stature, I'll give them a 20 gauge. 20 gauge guys can do just about as much as a 12 gauge can do, and it's just as devastating to be hit on that anywhere inside of 30 yards. So 20 gauge and 12 gauge are the two I recommend, and I personally would recommend the Mossberg 500 or 590 A1, because if it's the 500 and the 590, it has that safety above the action. If you don't have that kind of money, and that kind of money, we're talking about $350 to $400 for a used 500, and then the ones 590 A1s, they go up from probably $550 to $750, $850 for that gun. And there's different models. That one is one that I put wood furniture on, but I have one with collapsible stock. I have one with foldable stock. The 590 is probably the greatest shotgun ever made. Just like I said, the USP Tactical is probably the best pistol ever made. I agree with that here. I think the 590 A1 is the best shotgun ever made, simply because it will eat anything you put in it. So we've talked about a 22, we've talked about a pistol, and what I recommend there, the 19 or the 17 bucklock, and then we talked about a pump action shotgun. Because pump action shotguns don't fail, just make sure you practice with it. You want to make sure you can work that slide and shoot the gun each time. You also want to make sure you can work that slide to empty the gun if you're not going to shoot. Biggest thing is to continue to manipulate that, practice that in front of someone or with someone, so you get it right, so you can become very comfortable with the gun. Okay, so that's 3 categories. The next is going to be a bolt action rifle. So I'm going to show you here, bolt action rifles are just like anything else. This one is not loaded. This is a Savage 30-06. This is a 110 model. And this is a rifle that I've had for over 30 years. Okay. I have an LPVO scope on this. LPVO is a smaller plane scope. So it's a smaller plane optic. But this will do all you need to do from 200 to 300 yards here. And where I live in Texas, you're not going to get a shot, really, typically that's over 200 yards maybe. I've made shots with that rifle down in South Carolina and South Texas at over 600, 700 yards, though. So know your guns and know what scope to put on them. Starting out, a lower-powered fixed scope is what you want to do, a fixed because as you go through new tech, those things become more difficult and more confusing. I would suggest learn how to manipulate your scope and change your scope based on what you need. Okay, so with a bolt action gun, what caliber is the next question that comes up? I would shoot one that ammo is available for it. So 243 is a good one, 270 is a good one. I'm a 30 caliber man, which means I like 308, 30-06, 300 Win Mag. Okay, I just always have. When I shoot things with those rounds, those things go down. Okay. Plus, I'm old, I'm big, I don't want to go looking for things. So I want the bullet to have the desired result and put that animal down. So if you live in an area with bears or with moose or something that is larger game, I would recommend at least a 308, but maybe a 30-06 and then maybe a 300 Win Mag. In my mind, those are some of my favorite rounds. The 300 Win Mag specifically is big enough to kill anything in North America. So is the 308 and so is the 30-06. There are books dedicated to it. Okay, so the 30-06, there's one book, it's called 101 Rifle, and that gentleman used that gun, not that one specifically, but a 30-06, and killed every animal that is hunted on the planet. So he shot elephants, hippos, rhinos with 30-06, and they died. So just understand that being able to shoot your gun well also matters, but don't limit yourself thinking the round can't do what you want it to do. If you're going for bigger game, though, you want a bigger round. So I would say nothing smaller than a 308 or 30-06 for big game. Bolt action rifles can come in different prices and different sizes. Here's another one that I want to show you the way, and these are unloaded. This one's unloaded. You operate the bolt by basically picking the bolt up, pulling it back, and when you do, it will put a round in that there. You push it in, and it'll put the round in the chamber. And so this one has your safety and your fire right here. Most rifles are that way. Okay, so you squeeze the trigger there. This is a Christians in Arms 308. Just to give you an idea on the difference, there's an LPVO on that one. That rifle was built specifically to hunt bear with. That's why that's got an LPVO optic on it rather than a long range big optic. So the first one I showed you is 30-06. That one's 308. 308 is a great round. The biggest thing though about 308 is there's ammo always available. 30-06, there's always ammo available. If you get things like 6.5 Creedmoor, the different PRC rounds, etc., you're not going to be able to find ammo everywhere, and it will not be as cheap as being able to feed those two guns. So the first one, the Savage, that's probably around a $600-700 gun, maybe up to $900, depending. If you live in New England, it's probably $900. There are lesser models or newer options, which is more plastic and more Kydex type materials. Those typically go from $450 to $500 new. So you may even be able to pick one up at $300 or less. I saw up in New Hampshire, there's a bolt action 270 Winchester short mag up there for $320, and that was a heck of a deal. It was a Savage 110. As you see, the Savage, the first one I showed you, the magazine was internal. The second one had a box magazine, so that's something to think about too. Internal mag's great. You can't break that, knock it off. You've got 4 or 5 rounds in there, one in the chamber, but that box magazine lets you have up to 10, right? So those are bolt action rifles. Low range, you're talking, and I like Savage. I'd recommend Savage just because they've always maintained the same quality and expectation. Most of the other companies have been sold off or bounced around, so some of their weapons may not be to the same expectation around quality as those two. So the final category I had was a semi-automatic rifle. So these things are the things that people are saying are evil, etc. These are the guns that our police use. Our citizens here in America use them for home defense. I have one out all the time for home defense. You have several different options in that. So here's the thing. A semi-automatic rifle may be a Garand, which was in 30-06, and that's what won the World War, right? World War II, it was the Garand that our military carried. This was the next one. This is the M14, right? And this is a Scout model by Springfield. You see the small box magazine there, and you see how it's got a forward place to mount a scope. That's how you know it's a Scout model. This is a semi-automatic rifle. Okay, this one is in 308. 308 is a good caliber. I didn't get into 308 until probably the last decade. Prior to that, I was always 300 Win Mag and 30-06. But in the last decade, you know, as you get older, you want things that are a little bit lighter. Most 308s will be lighter than your standard 30-06 guns. Semi-automatic rifles are going to be heavy because of the amount of metal in them to work the operations. And of course, everyone's favorite semi-automatic rifle in America, and this one is loaded. This is my home defense. This is a Daniel Defense M4A1 and 5.56. So it's got a Surefire light on it. It's got an aim point optic on it. This gun, to build this gun out this way, will cost you probably around $6,000. But I don't skimp on the things that I depend on, right? So you can get a Smith & Wesson AR-15 and just get standard iron sights. You can get that for probably around $500 to $600. And if you go to stores that have a lot of inventory, a lot of times you can buy a used AR-15 for less. You can buy it for $300 up to $500 at most of those stores. You may say, Ben, why do I need one of those? It's very simple. Why do you think you would need more bullets if there's a larger threat and more people, right? So certain places that won't allow you to own that weapon, but you can own this weapon. This is better than not having a semi-automatic weapon. Bolt actions are fine for home defense. Shotguns are fine for home defense. If you're out in your yard and you have acreage, though, and there's a threat that can be posed on that, you're going to want a rifle to serve you in that situation. This also can be used for hunting, so can the other. The Second Amendment, though, in our Constitution is not about hunting. It's about self-defense. This weapon right here, people often call the AR-15 a weapon of war. These were issued to our soldiers that fought in Vietnam. It was issued to our soldiers in Korea. It was issued to our soldiers in Grenada in every different conflict. Matter of fact, there's a version of this gun today that still serves our military today in a different chassis as a designated marksman rifle. So the point is this. All guns all weapons are dangerous. If you have some trepidation about which one to pick, find someone that you know in your community that can responsibly show you how to use those. Pay a professional if you must. And if you go to a place and you pay a professional, the guy that comes out that shows you the weapon you don't think is professional, they don't follow the gun safety rules that we read initially, then maybe it's time to get out of there and go find someone else to show you this. Here's the point, though. To be effective with any tool, you have to practice with that tool. Weapons like these are no different. You have to practice with the ones you own. So you don't need to own a lot. You don't need to own everything here like I do. You can own just 2 or 3. If you're going to own 2, I suggest a Glock handgun and a Mossberg shotgun to start. If you get a Glock handgun and a Mossberg shotgun to start, and then a little bit later you buy yourself a light, it doesn't matter if it's expensive light or a cheap light, you're going to carry it with you every day. I suggest Surefire. Surefire is some of the best lights on the planet. I've been using them for over 30 years. They're great lights. So if you can only own 2 and you only have the budget for 2, start out with a Glock 9mm and a shotgun, be it 20 gauge or 12 gauge, and I would say the Mossberg 500 or 590. They have the 500s in 20 gauge, and now they have the 590s in 20 gauge as well. So you can get one of those in that order. If you don't have a lot of money, okay, and here's the point, just get something that's reliable and dependable. If you don't have a lot of money and you can't afford the Glock, you can get Glocks used for $300 to $400. If you only have $200 to spend on a gun, a high point pistol works just fine. But listen, if you're going to use a high point, only use the stock magazines that come with the gun. Don't use the extended magazines. The extended magazines fail, okay? The regular magazines work just fine. So if you want to get something that's cheaper than that, and I'm recommending that because I've seen other guns. High point also has a lifetime warranty on their weapons. So does Glock. These that I've all mentioned, all of these do because that's what I buy. The only company I would not recommend when it comes to a handgun is Taurus. Do not buy a Taurus. Do not own a Taurus. Don't even let someone give you a Taurus. Because if someone gives you a Taurus, then you may rely on it. You may carry it, and you may come into a bad situation because of that. I know 3 people that I can call on my phone that have had a Taurus that failed them in the time that they needed it. And one of them has been a friend of mine since the day I was born, and it almost cost him his life. And had his dog not been there and taken the bullet for him, he probably wouldn't be here today. So had he had a Glock or something like that, he probably could have got a shot off and minimized that risk beforehand. But his Taurus did what Tauruses do. It jammed, and then it failed to function. It failed to fire. So that's why I recommend what I'm recommending. It's my opinion, yes. But in my years, none of these guns have failed me. Okay, so when I pull the trigger, it goes boom. And if you're in a situation where you're defending your life, you need to know how to manipulate the safety. You need to know how to manipulate the trigger. You need to know how to aim at what it is you're shooting at in a way that you can reduce that threat as quickly as possible. So we may do some more videos around this subject matter. This is about wisdom. This channel is dedicated to any wisdom that may come down your path. I am a gun guy and have been my entire lifetime. I grew up on a farm in South Carolina, so we hunted for food. We hunted to protect the cattle and the pigs. We used our firearms to do all that. And occasionally we helped the sheriff's department when they were driving somebody across our property and helped them collect those people. Myself, I did that personally twice when I was a young man. So it kind of gives you an idea of you're never going to know what your firearms are needed for. But I say it like I said earlier. You can't carry a cop with you. You can't carry a fireman with you. A gun is no different than a fire extinguisher. Okay? Threats will happen. Dangers do occur. And the best tool you have to defend yourself against that threat, be it fire, be it human, be it bear, right? You want to have the best option available. With the 12 gauge shotgun, you can also use slugs in that to kill bear as well. They've been used for self-defense against bear many, many times. So just understand that a shotgun, you have the slug option, you have the buckshot option, right? 2 different options. So if you have limited money, you may want to get a shotgun before you get a rifle. If you have extremely limited money, I've already gone through that before, but I would start out with a pistol and a shotgun. And the shotgun should be 20 gauge or 12 gauge if you're going to have those bigger threats around you. The pistol, the handgun, of course, we say 9mm. That's what I recommend for people standard self-defense that are learning self-defense. I myself personally carry a 10mm. A lot of difference between the 9mm and the 10mm. 10 millimeter hits with huge pressures, and it's a very much of a beast of a round, where 9 millimeter is a little more, a little less, I guess is the best way to say it. But that's why I'm suggesting 9 millimeter as well for a first gun, or a 22 pistol as well, because the more times you shoot it, the recoil is not obnoxious. So if you're a small stature person and you shoot a 9 millimeter pistol, the recoil should be manageable. Guys, if you want to turn your woman off of guns, let her ask you to go shoot one day and you put a 44 Magnum in her hand. Okay? I love 44 mag. It's a great round. But at the end of the day, that's going to scare the fire out of people that have never shot before. And secondarily, it could be dangerous. They actually could have the gun come back in their direction and their hand still be stuck in the trigger well, which I've seen many, many times. So if you're going to have somebody shoot a higher caliber pistol, put one round in the pistol if it's a revolver. In a handgun, same thing. Use limited ammunition. Less ammunition you use in the gun while someone brand new is training, the less of a threat to something bad happening, where there's a negligent discharge or a situation where the weapon is pointed somewhere other than downrange. So hopefully this is enlightening. Hopefully it's useful to you. These are my opinions, but these all do come from my experience and what I've suggested to my own family, my own friends. So know that I do think about these type things before I put them together. And the last piece I'm going to say on this is guns are not evil, right? People are. Guns are tools. And if you look, when it comes to self-defense, trying to pull this up real quick. If you look into if you look into self-defense and those type items, it's your responsibility to protect yourself and protect the family. The reason I say that is when you go somewhere and something bad happens, no one is coming to save you. You're going to have to figure out how to save yourself. And I say that because I've been in situations quite a few times where I was the only answer to the problem. And if you're of a mindset that someone's going to be able there quickly enough to help you out of a situation, they're not. So have what you need on hand, right? Have what you need where you can be protected, where you can be safe from anything that may be a threat to you and yours. And I was looking for a Bible verse, but I can't find it right now. It basically said, if a man doesn't have a sword, let him sell his cloak and buy one. So the Bible's suggestion around protecting yourself was to have a weapon to use. And if you don't have a weapon, sell something that you have so that you can go and buy a weapon, because our personal responsibility for self-defense falls on our shoulders. And second to that, you're responsible for the security of your family as well. So if you have weapons, and you hear me say often, these are loaded, they're stored in a way where a family member can't get to them to be putting themselves in danger, right? It could be a lockbox. It could be that you put them in a high hide or something like that. Do what you have to do to secure your weapons so they're used for what you expect them to be used for, and not something that's a terrible situation in your house to threaten your own family. This went kind of long. I don't think I'm going to go any longer into this. This is one of my favorite subjects to discuss. You can probably tell. I could go through each one of these firearms and give you 30 tips around each one and what to do and how to clean it and how to use it and everything else. But this is just an overview for to answer some questions that a friend of mine reached out on, but also answer it in a way that I've answered them many, many times in the past. So make sure you're standing up to the responsibility of defending yourself and defending your family. If you're in America, especially, your Second Amendment is your right? I mean, this is by birth. The Constitution just secures it. Doesn't matter how you vote. You should be in support of your Constitution. It doesn't matter who you like. You should want to have your Second Amendment and want to carry and be educated to be able to do that. It's just like your computer or anything else. Anything can be dangerous if it's used poorly. Okay? Cars specifically come to the top of my mind because people act irresponsible in cars all the time and are far, far more dangerous in their cars than they are with their guns. So just think about those things as well. I'm Ben. If you like content such as this, please like, please subscribe. If you made it to the end of the video here, I appreciate you. Please subscribe to the channel and please share. Be good.